We are going to call this meeting to order. We'll begin with item number 2, adoption of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Chairman Heyman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving to item number 3, public comment on closed session. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on the phones? None? Okay, with that, we will now move into closed session. This meeting to order. It is to open session. It is 12:11. We'll begin with report out on closed session with Attorney Keith Lemieux.
Sure. The board met in closed session to discuss real property negotiations for the water listed on the agenda, as well as the various litigations. The board received a report from staff on all those matters. No reportable action took place. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody will please stand and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we will have roll call.
Chairman Heyman,
Present.
Vice Chair Peters,
Present.
Director Vallejo,
Present.
Director Itmeyer,
Present.
Director Kaczynski.
Present.
Okay, item number 6, public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Go ahead, Judy.
Good morning. Judy Decker, Vice Chairman of the PAC Committee. I note that at the last board meeting, the Water District Representative Chuck Griffin asked that the report that the PAC Committee gave you on domestic wells and how the domestic well owner and the consultant could go through the requirements that were needed for reviewing a domestic well that was in trouble. He asked to have that on the agenda for board discussion. I note that it is not on the board agenda for discussion this month, and that is very disappointing because since that time you have had another person apply for mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Chairman Heyman, this is Steve. If I might just I think I can help. In answer to that, we did modify the report form and included the fact sheet. The comments that we received on the PAC, those have been addressed. It is under a GA staff review right now. And as early as yesterday, I sent it over to George at the Water District so that George could see it too, because George had asked questions and I knew Chuck had asked questions. I let them know it's under GA staff review as a draft, but we wanted to get it to them because they were asking questions too. So it is in process.
Very good. Thank you, Steve.
Chairman, can I jump in there real quick as well? I just wanted to let Judy know that item number 10 on the agenda is a shallow wells impact identification, evaluation, and mitigation program update. So I think that's addressing those issues that were brought up.
Okay, any other public comment from the floor? Seeing none, any public comment on the phones? No further public comment. We'll now move to agenda item number 7, board member comments.
None.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 8, consent agenda. This consists of items 8A, approve minutes of the board meeting, and items 8B, approve the expenditures of B1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Any member of the board wish to have an item pulled? Any member of the public wish to have an item pulled? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 9, resolution of 07-23, amending the bylaws to add a purchasing policy. And I believe that this will be with Keith.
It is with Keith. So at the last meeting, you'll recall that you requested we provide a purchasing policy for, I think we had brought an item up, and it was a very low amount, and I think it might have been Director Vallejo said, why don't we have a purchasing policy? So we came back with one. There is the section in our bylaws that was empty, that was waiting for the purchase policy to arrive, and so that's what we used. So this will be an amendment to the bylaws. For the substantive provisions of the purchasing policy, because we're a JPA, it's best practice to have it consistent with at least the purchasing policy of some of our members so that things can be easy and consistent. For that reason, we reached out to the Water District, and what you see before you is an amended version essentially of the Water District purchasing policy. The key provisions of that include the following. You're delegating to the general manager the authority to make purchases up to $50,000 without board approval. The policy then provides procurement procedures that include formal bidding, informal bidding, negotiated purchases, direct purchases, and emergency purchases, which all apply to purchases made at different costs and under different circumstances as described in the policy. It also provides direction on formal bid procedures, including giving the timing and so on for bid notices, invitation, bid security, bid opening, the award by the board, and resolution. And then the last thing it does as a little bonus is it provides for the acquisition and disposition of real property so that it's consistent with the Surplus Land Act. So again, the details of these and the timings and so on essentially mirror the Water District's rules. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. We'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments from the board.
I've got one question. Would that same limit apply? Let's say that there was a change order to that contract at some point. Say we had one, right up to the $50,000 limit. There's a change order for 5 or 10%, pushes it beyond that. Would it then need to come back to the board to be authorized, or would this be a limit just for that initial contract amount?
It contains language about how to deal with that, and you've got me looking it up right now.
No problem.
My recollection is that it puts a cap on the change order so that it can't be in excess of the original 50, but I'm double checking that to confirm.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, it does say on page 4, number 4, the general manager is authorized to approve orders that result in a price increase as long as the cumulative total of all change orders approved by the general manager or designee for a single contract does not exceed $50,000.
Perfect. Thank you.
Which does bring up a good point, though. In each agency their own, but the way we do cost control here in Inyo County is we do it per vendor to avoid what you might call a piecemealing contract process, which is maybe something we should consider. changing that language to from a single contract to a single vendor in any given fiscal year. Just something to chew on. I'm not making that request at this point, but it might be something worth talking through at this level here.
Yeah, I would agree with Director Vallejo that, I'm not suggesting we change that necessarily on the fly right now, but that's something that we could definitely ask staff to insert in the future.
Well, so you could approve it today as is. I would recommend that if you don't and want to do this vendor concept, it's probably, I would need to read through the whole policy for consistency because it's likely that that change may have ramifications elsewhere. So in that case, then I would request that if you want to do the vendor thing, I would have to take it back and do a red line and come back to you with that. Or we could just save it for, we could just wait and see if it truly is a problem and then amend it if you discover it's a problem.
Yeah, personally, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think that I'm okay with moving forward on this as is, but that's just, a good potential policy we could look at, just how this all plays out in the future.
I have a question for Mr. Vallejo. Are you implying that a single project or single contract? I guess what I'm asking, are you saying within a single contract there could be multiple vendors as subcontractors? I'm sort of not understanding you.
No, thanks for the question. The way we at Inyo County look at this spending limit is per vendor per fiscal year. So for example, if you had a project that in theory could be handled all in one contract, but reasonably could also be broken up into two. But if the contract total, the project total would be more than the spending limit, and you decided to go with the same vendor for whatever reasons you might have, you'd have to go to the board for that whole project, even if you wanted to do two separate contracts, so that you're not awarding more than the spending cap to one vendor just by breaking up a contract into more than one and breaking up a project into more than one contract when it could be one contract.
Thank
Does that
you.
make sense?
I don't see a problem with it. We've been dealing with it for years, and if it became a problem, most of the times the manager would come up and say, by the way, I got multiple vendors or multiple contracts here, and here's what's happening. So it's typically, at least the board is informed about it. But I haven't seen a problem with it, so I don't have a problem with the way it's written.
Yeah.
Chairman, if I may, Phil Hall,
Yes.
Deputy County Counsel. What John is referring to is correct. There's a statute where we're doing county purchasing that talks about vendors, and it used to be a $125,000 limit. I think they raised it 2 years ago to $175,000 that allows county purchasing agency to send out contracts without it going through the Board of Supervisors. That I think is what John is referring to, because we have that limitation for at the county level. Here, I think there's two things to consider, which is probably why the water district doesn't have this limitation on multiple vendors. You have a small base out here of potential contractors for things that the water agency might need, or so the water district might need. So I would keep that in mind and realize that you're going to see the bills. So if you see one vendor with multiple contracts, you're going to see them as they're coming through your agenda. So I'm not advising one way or the other. I'm just kind of telling you there's two safeguards, and there's a reason why we at the county have this particular issue, because we have a statute on point. But just keep in mind you have a small base of operations here which you could lend out to purchase items from vendors, and you're going to see the numbers. So
Thank you, sir.
Well, barring any public comment, I'm ready to make a motion.
We will go to public comment first, John, and then we'll come back to the board. So we'll bring it to the floor for any public comment. Okay, seeing none on the floor. We do have a caller. Caller, go ahead. Caller, go ahead.
Hello, this is Renee West of Lusk. I just have a question. Is $50,000 a standard amount? Is that why I consider it rather high, but maybe it's not. Is that what is usually put in policies like this?
Well, you want me to answer that?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
The amount is whatever the board wants the amount to be. As far as whether this is typical, I would say it is typical. But I've seen it lower and I've seen it higher.
And I just have one other question. This is going to be per contract, correct?
That's right.
So it's possible to have 3 or 4 or 5 $50,000 contracts all approved by the general manager, correct?
Yes, but over time, it could be even more. This is meant to cover sort of routine expenditures that, are consistent with the authorization and necessary for us to do our work. I will say, having said all that, in this particular entity, we don't have a whole lot of those, which is why the purchasing policy took 5 years to suddenly pop up. It's very rare that we've got the general manager making any decisions about purchasing that don't go in front of the board in one form or another.
So would this be mainly used for emergency type things?
No, there are emergency procedures in there. This would Renee, I would say this is mainly used for what I would call routine expenditures, which is, buying paper for the copier and things like that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, seeing no further public comment, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Chairman, I just wanted to say I appreciated the suggestions that we've heard from Ms. Westalesk as well as Director Vallejo, but I think those are things, especially considering we'll be seeing the numbers anyway. I'm happy to make a motion to move forward with the resolution as is.
I'll second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters, Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 10, Shallow Wells Impact Identification, Evaluation, and Mitigation Program Update. This will be with Stetson Engineers and Steve Johnson.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. This is Steve. Good morning to the board, and Mr. Chairman, and all of the obviously important stakeholders out there that are participating. Just as a quick follow-up to the question raised during public comment by Ms. Judy Decker, we have implemented the PAC recommendations into the draft of the report form and the fact sheet. As I mentioned, there staff is reviewing it. We did pass on to the Water District, but more importantly, I wanted Judy to know that before it goes to the board, it goes back to the PAC. We're going to send whatever comments we get from our internal review, water and such. We'll go back to the PAC and make sure the PAC is good with it. And we still anticipate getting this to the board for its stamp at the December meeting. So that's an update. Secondly, this item on the agenda is not an action item. This is information only. Because we're getting more and more inquiries about the shallow well impact and mitigation program. We're getting more and more well owners indicating that they have impacts to their wells and having issues. We thought that it would be good to start developing a summary format that we can keep track of these things. The board can keep track of it. We can post it on a periodic basis. My thought is that we'll meld this kind of a summary sheet into the Water Resources Manager written report and not give a report every month, but it would be available in the written report to see where we're at, what applications have been received, and what the status is for each of the applications. So that's the purpose, is to get, and frankly, it's part of my own concept, my own idea, because I was getting confused as to which ones we're looking at and where they're at, and I thought it would be a good idea just to have a summary sheet that anybody can check and see where we're at, where the staff is at, where the applicant is at, because a lot of times the applications are incomplete. We can't proceed till the application is complete. So we've got Myra Robert Lopez is going to do a brief presentation with a staff report and the format of the summary. So, Myra, if you're ready.
Yep. Hi, good afternoon. So the staff report basically provides an update on the shallow well mitigation program and the current status of the ongoing applications. As Steve has mentioned, there's 2 impacted well owners that are in the process of applying for the primary program. Currently, we're still waiting on the well drillers report to complete their application. Following that, we'll do an evaluation and prepare a draft staff report, and then that would be provided to the well owner for review and commenting prior to bringing it to the board for action. Additionally, we have reached out to another impact well owner and informed them about the program. I did want to mention that since the last board meeting, we have not received any other additional applications for the program. And then, as Steve has mentioned, we're currently reviewing the PAC's comments, and we've incorporated that into a draft a draft report form, which is currently being reviewed by the GA and then will be brought to the PAC for review before bringing it to the board for decision. So this is an informational item, and no action is required for this staff report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments.
None?
Seeing none, any public comment from the floor?
Yes. Since you're making a list of the applicants, I think it would be useful not only for yourselves, but for the board members to create a map and put these impacted wells that have already applied and the ones that are going to apply in the future on the map so people can relate to where they are with regards to the valley and to their proximity to large production wells. I don't think that would be too difficult to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
If I may,
Go
if I may, Mr. Chairman, this is Steve coming back. If I may, Mr. Chairman, clearly great minds think alike, Judy, because when I saw this staff report, one of my first questions to myself was, what if they ask me where these are? So we did prepare a pretty darn good detailed map. We will attach it to the documents as they're being reviewed by staff and as it goes to the PAC. That clearly shows the local streets and the areas where these impacted wells are located. So good suggestion, and yes, it will be available. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I would agree, Judy. And I've seen prior we had, I think on a map you had it marked, Steve, on with the like Stark Street well and another well, and I remember seeing that. So I think I concur. It's a good idea to see it on a, along with the current status of the shallow well mitigation wells that we have currently going.
Actually, I have another comment. Probably in another part of your discussion, Steve, you're going to talk about water quality. The latest applicant, well, I'm not sure they've applied, but excuse me, the latest well on the list is in an area of known poor water quality. This is not a recent water quality issue. It has been known for at least 50 years that the Rademacher Street area has poor quality water. And I think something like that needs to be noted also.
If I might, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Judy. You're absolutely correct. The application has not been received. Based upon staff review and our staff calls, we were instructed or directed or requested to reach out to that person on Rademacher Street and let them know what the program is and give them the information to apply. They have not yet applied. We do not have an application. There are multiple organizations, including the county, Kern County, looking at trying to help these folks. But you're absolutely correct. This will be the first one. If they do apply, it'll be the first one we will have to address water quality. And we are aware that this is an area of water quality issues so sometimes. So thank you.
Chair, I have a question for Steve Johnson?
Go ahead.
Steve, when it comes to water quality, are we setting up a process for the well owner to provide a sample that is either they get tested or somehow it is tested? Is that going to be a requirement or something you're going to consider?
Yeah, I think absolutely, Director Kaczynski. We absolutely need that information. It's pretty clear based upon the correspondence we've seen. We don't have an application, but it's pretty clear that there are serious water quality problems with this well, everything we've seen, and we know there are water quality problems in the area. Under the program, we still have the obligation to make a determination for the board as a staff report whether or not declining water levels are a cause or a primary cause of the water quality problem or not. And so that would be part of the staff review should we get an application.
Okay, and is the well owner responsible for the cost of that, or will that be passed on to the GA?
We typically, the well owner would be responsible for that. I believe the well owner already has water quality information, but we have not received it yet because, as mentioned, we don't have an application. But I believe they have water quality test results.
Thank you.
Steve, I have a question. Dave Janis, PAC Chair. I have a question for you and Carol regarding the mechanics of getting to a board decision at the very next meeting, the December meeting. The next meeting of the PAC is not able to be held. Next regularly scheduled meeting is the day before Thanksgiving, and we will be unable to hold that one. So we'll have to, if we need to meet formally, we'll have to work around that and find an available date. Timeline-wise, the mechanics, were you intending to submit this to PAC members for individual comment and collation and the information back to you so you could make any changes prior to that December meeting? Otherwise, I'm a little confused as to how we can get to the December timeline for a final approval. Do you follow me?
Yeah, I understand. Big picture, David, is that these modifications, additions that were provided by the PAC and are included in this redraft of the report form and the fact sheet. These are not changes to the program, but they are very good, welcome clarifications as to how the program works. I don't think it's not gonna be a big issue to have the board approve the report form and inclusion of the fact sheet. I don't think that's gonna be a big deal. I doubt the PAC's gonna have any comments. We basically took essentially all of the comments that were provided. Our intention would be to go work with April at the GA board, at the GA, and work with you, and however best to get it out and get information back, and then bring it back to the board as soon as we can. I don't think there's any urgency with this. We will use this document internally as we are going through any new applications and make a decision as to what to send them. But it's all pretty fluid process, and there's nothing in what we're doing now that changes what we've been doing in the past. It's just more clarification.
Thanks, Steve. In that case, I would suggest we get it, if we have the proposed copies out now, we get it forwarded to all the members, and we schedule an alternate date meeting if we can in November. And if we get back replies that indicate we need to have that meeting to discuss something, then we'll have that alternate date in hand and do so. And because we think it's important, even though it isn't a policy change, it's the information to the public and their understanding and aid in helping them apply and whether they're even eligible and what considerations, et cetera. That's speaking for the PAC. That's our opinion.
Yeah, that's good. We'll work on that track, David. All good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other public comment from the floor or on the phones? Okay, seeing none, this is an informational item and does not require any action from the board. Moving on to item number 11, the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority legislative agenda there's a slight typo here, it should say 2024 to 2026, and the 2024 work plan. This will be with Capitol Corps, Michael McKinney.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Earlier in the year, the board directed staff to develop a legislative agenda, and that is what you have before you. Typically, legislative agendas are long horizon documents. They are living documents. They specify specific legislative goals as well as public policy goals for the authority. And in this case, what we have done is we have taken that for the remaining portions of the congressional and California session, as well as the next sessions of the legislature next year, and created that. These are a living document. They need to be continually updated. As a matter of fact, I'll make some changes on the fly here to the document that we have before you. But in here, you have the actual goals for public policy work associated with the authority, as well as objectives for the for those goals, and then specific directives made by the board to staff for 2024. To go over the goals, I'll just briefly read them. The very first goal being identify and secure government funding for groundwater sustainability measures included within the GSP. The objective here, of course, is to reduce and minimize the financial impact to both ratepayers and taxpayers associated with segment compliance. The next goal here is to achieve necessary approvals to effectuate imported water supplies and complete infrastructure in order to achieve sustainability. And here, this is really government affairs work dealing with permits, approvals, regulatory requirements, agreements that are needed, both at the local, state, and maybe even the federal level. The next here is a pretty standard goal, as I would say, is preserve and protect the Indian Wells Valley's current and future water resources. This really deals with supporting legislation and regulation which achieves the requirements of the GSP, as well as supporting state and federal legislation and regulation that promotes groundwater sustainability measures, drought protection, and water infrastructure. The last goal here is the negative goal, which is defeat public policies that would endanger that groundwater sustainability or risk ratepayer or taxpayer investments into our groundwater resilience. This is basically opposing legislation or regulation that would substantially risk ratepayer or taxpayer investment that has already been made into the groundwater sustainability measures, as well as opposing legislation or regulations that might impede the implementation of the groundwater sustainability plan. In here, it is our belief always that public agencies should see a return on investment. And you have a brief summary in here and included in here as to what the authority has spent thus far, what it has received since 2019, and then moving on into here is the actual legislative agenda. I don't want to go into too much detail here because it'll take forever, but on page 5, I will say that there is a change that has already been made here. Within that graph at the bottom of the page for the interconnection pipeline project, we have an in-progress request of $150 million. That has now increased to $175 million. Also, 2 down from that is the water recycling plant. That was the original envisioned water recycling plant requesting a permit at 5.3. We had an in progress of 1.325. The board has decided to hold that and kind of redefine the water recycling plant, so that needs to be removed. Total requested at this point is $175 million that is currently in progress being requested from government agencies. I will pause here for a moment and ask if there are any questions with regard to the goals or any suggestions, as well as the objectives associated with the legislative agenda.
Any questions from the board? Okay. We have none, Mike, so continue on.
Continuing on. The next thing you'll see is the actual directives, and these are the directions that the board would be giving to the staff and what we would be doing over the course of 2024. And as you can see here, a lot of that has to do with seeking and obtaining the passage of the $200 million congressional authorization, which is your $150 million in progress, and then seek and obtain approval of that $25 million line item. That is already in progress. So that directive is actually already started. We'll continue on. The third one here is actually assisting the city of Ridgecrest in obtaining $5 million as part of a DCIP grant for the wastewater treatment plant. That may increase to $7 million. That is at the discretion of the city. What we will be doing is offering support into that area. There are other fundings, such as now the recycled water efforts, the well mitigation, the land repurposing, and environmental mitigation associated with all of the GSP related projects. Those we will continue to look at and seek for funding during 2024. The next one is actually beginning the process of appropriating the authorization, the very first directive up here. And this may carry over all the way into 2026 as a directive. From here, I'm going to go over basically what is the work plan designed to put these directives into place, which is how we have typically done this, is have put together a work plan that the board has approved. Jeff Simonetti, while you are on, would you begin with milestone number 1, which is our imported water supply scope of work?
Yes. Good morning, Chair and members of the board. So for task 1 particularly pertains to the purchase of imported water. And for people who are looking at the board packet, particularly online, this starts on page 73 and 74 of the full agenda packet. So task 1 specifically pertains to the importation of purchased water. And so it's broken into 4 subtasks. So subtask A is specifically finalizing the agreements that we're currently negotiating with potential water sellers and finalizing the agreements to make those purchases. Tasks B and C particularly pertain to the regulatory approvals that would be necessary for multiple different items. So if there are regulatory approvals that would be necessary to exchange or move that water in terms of title into the groundwater authority or to our exchange partner, that would address those. And also it would be supporting projects such as with Provost and Pritchard on the imported water pipeline. Then task D specifically deals with if there are other potential water supplies that become available, we will provide information to the groundwater authority to make sure that they're aware of that and allow them to make a decision on whether they want to move forward or not. And that's specifically how task 1 moves forward. Mike, take it over from here.
Sounds good. The next milestone 2 is specific to the interconnection pipeline project. In 2023, we were told by Stetson that an additional $600,000 to $1 million in grant funding was needed to complete the planning phases for the project. This goal is already in progress, but will likely carry over into 2024. We have identified a source, and I believe we'll be bringing a grant application request to the board in the near future for part or all of these funds. Also in 2024 is the WRDA Congressional Authorization Water Resources Development Act. That will need to take place during the year as long as our request is approved by the senator or the congressman. And then the $25 million state budget request is also in progress and will have to be passed during that particular year. That is primarily our focus for 2024 in our work plan. And then our third milestone is all of the other projects that are supporting the GSP, specifically whatever is decided with regard to water recycling measures, we will support. Assist the city of Ridgecrest in preparing a $5 to $7 million DCIP grant, identify and secure state funding for well mitigation measures and systems consolidation, as well as identifying and securing state and federal funding sources for land repurposing. Also in here is the support of policy measures, seeking the support and passage of a comprehensive state water strategy. In 2022, the governor did put together a water strategy. It has stalled based on the state's budget situation. We would like to see that moved forward because we believe there will be sources of funding in there and there will be sources of assistance in complying with SGMA. And then the other two are specific goals relative to legislation or regulation dealing with groundwater adjudication, SGMA, all of the things that we saw during 2023 that have increased as a result of the implementation of SGMA. That is the work plan at this particular point in time. I will answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Michael. We'll bring it back to the board for any questions.
I just wanted to say thank you to Capital Corps for the work you guys have done so far. I think it's been very beneficial for the Groundwater Authority, and I'm looking forward to the good things we're going to accomplish next year.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Chairman Heyman, I would concur with Vice Chair Peters that Capital Corps has done a tremendous amount of work and been a great benefit to the GA and to this community and basin. So it does look like you got a lot of work cut out for you, and with the changes in Congress and the current state of the political format, it looks like you got your work cut out for you. But I look forward to this year and seeing how much more we can accomplish. So we appreciate you greatly.
Well, thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
Just want to reiterate, thank you to Todd and Mike and Jeff. And just one question, with the political climate and budgets getting blown up both in the state and the federal government, do you expect that's going to affect anything that we're looking for?
So with regard to the federal, we are asking for an authorization. It is not an appropriation, meaning that the federal budget really will have no impact on us until calendar year 2026, fiscal year 2027. So hopefully the climate changes a little bit and things will kind of reverse around. The $25 million state budget request is a heavy lift. However, both our senator and our assembly member have stepped up and are ready to take on that fight and are already working in Sacramento with various parties to look for a potential budget line item for this. I'm hopeful on it. It's not a small task, but we'll be right there rubbing elbows and pushing this thing as hard as we can with our legislators.
Thank you.
Okay, any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, we do have public comment on the phone, so caller, go ahead. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Renee Westerlusk. I just have a question. I'm a little confused on the cost of the pipeline. You had mentioned $175 million earlier in the discussion, but when I look at the slide where it shows the breakdown of the pipeline and then wastewater treatment, water recycling plant, it's higher. It's $201 million. Is that the higher because we have to provide matching funds to get the $175 million?
So where we are, Renee, on this is a $211 million project, $11 million in planning, $200 to $201 million in actual construction. We can receive up to 75% of that through the Water Resources Development Act. So that would be $150 million that we could do. And then the state has agreed to give us a match of $25 million, or our state legislators have agreed to try and get us a match of $25 million is a better way to put that. And so they are advancing another $25 million on that, on top of that. So you have 175 million sort of in progress towards a $201 million goal. The remaining portion of that may have to be a local match or may come from some other source. That is still to be determined and to be solved. But if we were to get all of this, you would be looking at the vast majority of the project being paid for through government funding as far as the construction of that project.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Renee. Any other public comments on the phones? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. And with that, we will move on to the next agenda item.
I believe that one requires approval, Mr. Chairman.
We will bring it back to the board.
The work plan.
I'll move
for
approval.
motion.
I'll second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 12, approval of the change in scope of work and budget for contract with Provost and Pritchard Consulting Group for the CEQA NEPA documents. That will be with Jeff and Bianca with Stetson.
Yes, correct. This is Steve. Just we've got two items, both item 12 and 13, related to subcontract services under the implementation grant by Provost and Pritchard. These are change orders for things that are coming up while the project is going. I think Jeff is on, but I think Bianca is going to actually present both of these as staff report, and they do both require action. So Bianca, when you're ready.
Hello, this is Bianca. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. Yes, so some background on this item. The authority has contracted with Provost and Pritchard Consulting Group for CEQA NEPA and permitting documentation services for the imported water project, which is being funded by DWR's implementation grant. The original contract fee is for a total not to exceed of $1,013,722. In August of this year, the board approved a change order request from Provost and Pritchard to increase the budget by $58,876 for a revised total not to exceed fee of $1,072,598. Today, we present to the board an additional change order request from Provost and Pritchard for additional costs associated with addition of weekly management meetings with the Bureau of Land Management, as well as preparation of the BLM's plan of development, which is required by the BLM to meet the mitigation measures to keep compliant with their desert renewable energy conservation plan. In addition, costs are associated with biological and cultural surveying due to the reconfiguration of the pipeline alignment outside of private lands and into California state park lands, as well as addition of a tribal monitor for field work. And lastly, reviewing additional public comment letters as a result of a request to extend the public comment period, as well as assisting the BLM with their 30-day scoping period. This is for a request in change of $103,000 for a revised total not to exceed fee of $1,175,598. Staff recommends that the board approve this change order. And I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. We'll bring it back to the board. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yes. First of all, I noticed the reconfiguration of pipeline alignment. I wasn't aware of that. It happened recently, the realignment onto California State Parkland?
This is Jeff Helsley. That happened during the preliminary design process. It's, I think we're getting off of maybe one or two private, well, maybe a little bit more than that, private parcels. When they were doing the preliminary design, they realized that the construction was going to be very difficult through that area, and there were going to be some problems there.
So it was known before the original bid for the CEQA NEPA?
No, these projects, this is a little unusual situation. We typically would have done the preliminary design before we awarded the contract for the CEQA NEPA work, but because of our both, so this happened after the award of the contract for the NEPA and CEQA work.
Okay. The only other question I have is, wasn't the $58,000 request just the last board meeting? I believe it was pretty recently. And so we already have another $103,000 increase requested. I'm just curious as to whether we can expect some more in the very near future.
We don't have one that we're expecting at the moment. Again, the nature of this project, not having the preliminary design done, or ideally we would have gone to 30% design, creates some uncertainties, potential changes in the scope. But at the moment, we don't have one that's headed our way.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, any public comment from the floor?
I am George Kroll, General Manager, Indian Wells Valley Water District. We looked at the BLM website, and we noticed that there was a rather lengthy list of items that were not going to be considered in the NEPA analysis, including like public, there's some things about public, I don't know if it's public utilities, agriculture, and we were curious, is the funding in there to do more socioeconomic analysis, or is the general analysis being done under NEPA, under the cost of this contract, strictly or primarily focused towards natural and cultural resources and less towards socioeconomic? And if there are additional analyses that need to be performed, to look at these socioeconomic issues, such as costs to the community and whatnot, would that incur additional costs if the contractor were to need to perform those type of analysis, or decided to in response to comments?
We don't have the NEPA contractor here on the line, and I don't know the specific answer to that, whether that's within the budget or not. My understanding is there have been some discussion with BLM about that type of study, but I don't know where that's at.
Okay.
Generally speaking, this is John Vallejo. Generally speaking, my understanding is the NEPA and the CEQA reviews and examine environmental impacts and only examine those other types of impacts to the extent that they actually relate directly to an environmental impact or a potential environmental impact.
Thank you.
If I could address the potential need to do social and economic analysis. We weren't sure until scoping closed if there would be any public suggestion to do that kind of study. There have been a couple comments that I've seen that have suggested that we do that kind of analysis, and so I'm not sure the provost and Pritchard could have predicted what would come through with scoping. However, it's not unreasonable to expect that, any number of the 18 typical factors that NEPA considers that they would have to analyze. Seeing as how scoping just closed last weekend, we're not real sure how in depth any of that analysis would need to be. So, we'll have to discuss it with Provost and Pritchard to see, where we think the analysis should go. So my experience with NEPA tells me that a contractor that would bid a NEPA document, in this case, a joint NEPA-CEQA document, would include some level of analysis for any of the 18 factors that NEPA considers. If it needs to be more in-depth, well, more cost might be justified, but a very basic analysis should be included.
Thank you, Tom.
Chairman, I just wanted to hop in real quick and say, I don't mean this in any disparaging way. I appreciate the answers that we've gotten so far, but in the future, I think it would be a good idea for a change order, especially one that's, almost 10%, that we have the contractor that's requesting that change order here, so they might be able to answer those questions a little bit better.
Any other public comment on the floor? Seeing none, we do have public comment on the phone. Caller, go ahead. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Renee Westelas. I just want to know, are change orders like this common when you're doing these kind of CEQA and NEPA required studies?
Would anybody like to take a shot at that?
Well, I believe that especially the NEPA process can vary somewhat based on who the lead agency is or the particular situations of the project. So those variations can cause some change orders. I think this project does probably have more than might be typical. And again, it's because we didn't have, we started the NEPA and CEQA at the same time we started the design, which is very unusual to do. So that is leading to, I think, some of the increased costs we're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Renee. So I just want to add that in the initial costs that were that we were looking at for this project, it was factored into the estimates that we would have possible areas that unforeseen costs that would come up. So it's my understanding and thoughts that this falls well within those parameters. So I don't see anything that's alarming here at all. So we'll bring it back to the board for motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Nope. John got me.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 13, approval of the change in scope of work and budget for contract with Provost and Pritchard Consulting Group for design services for the imported water pipeline. And again, this will be with Steve Johnson and Stetson, and I believe Bianca.
Yes. I think Bianca's ready.
Yes, I am. Okay, so this is similar to the previous item discussed. The authority has also contracted with Provost and Pritchard for the design of the imported water project, which again is being funded by DWR Sigma Implementation Grant. The design contract's original scope of work is for a total not to exceed fee of $6,440,000. And in August, the board approved a change order request from Provost and Pritchard for an increase of $120,000 and $120,051, excuse me, for a total not to exceed fee of $6,560,051. We are presenting to the board today an additional request for a change order for costs associated with development of the BLM's plan of design, as well as biweekly management meetings as requested by BLM. This change in cost is for a total of $73,543 for a revised contract amount of $6,560,051. Sorry, I misspoke. The change in cost is $73,543 for an amended not to exceed fee of $6,633,594. Staff recommends that the board approve this change order, and we are open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Any board members have any comments?
I just want to reiterate what Director Peters said. I think when we get these kind of increases, that maybe it ought to be someone here to explain them, because this is almost nearly maybe 4% of the total project originally estimate, which is quite a lot of money for a $6 million project. So when we see these kind of increases, it'd be nice if we, I guess what you're asking is a face-to-face so we can ask questions. I agree with that.
If we have additional change orders, we will do that, Director.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments from the board?
No, sir. Sure, can I add something?
Yes.
I don't think it was well understood how complex the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan amendment to our land use plan was when the project was initially started, especially, by the contractor. We've had to give them a lot of instruction on basically where to look within the plan, because it is really complicated. So I guess I'm not surprised that they're asking for a cost increase. I will say that, the additional meetings that we have agreed upon, to do, basically we have a weekly meeting. One is with managers on one week, and the next week is with the interdisciplinary team, is to basically try to keep the schedule, because this is a really complex project to try to do the design concurrently with the NEPA and CEQA. And so, I realize that it does look like the costs are, continuing to rise, and I can't speak to how the contractor bid the job and what was implied. That's really for for Stetson and the GA to evaluate whether or not you think those costs are reasonable. But we're trying, by meeting more frequently, to try to shorten the time gap between our meetings so that things don't stall. And so we are trying our best to keep it on schedule so that, you don't exceed the performance period of the grant from DWR.
Good. Jump in there real quick.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Tom, and appreciate the context, and your points are well taken. And I personally don't have any issues with the change orders per se. I think it makes sense and kind of is in the realm of expectations. But just moving forward, I do think it would be a good idea if the person with the contract was here. So if we have any more questions, like one we saw earlier about the NEPA process, that they might be able to answer that a little bit more within the parameters of that contract. So that was the only point I was wanting to make.
Thank you, Vice Chair Peters. And I think, if I heard Jeff right, I think he's stated that in the future that we'll be looking to bring the appropriate parties in. So I think that's pretty concurred view from the board. So, okay. Any public comment from the floor? Any public comment on the phones? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll make a motion for approval.
I'll second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Kaczynski.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, item number 14, Water Resources Managers Report, and that will be with Stetson and Steve Johnson.
Great. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we're at, good afternoon, everybody. We're in the afternoon now. Two quick things. One, I want to thank Tom for making those comments. I really appreciate Tom saying that. And yes, we are all working together very hard to try and make things happen. And there's a lot of complexities, and we are on a time frame. So yeah, there's a lot going on. And secondly, just for the general information of the board, from my perspective, I've been doing this for 45 years, and I just got to tell you, I think Provost and you've selected a good contractor. Provost and Pritchard is doing a good job. They are very diligent, and they are making your project a priority. So I'll just say they're doing a good job. You've got a good contractor there to help get this thing done, and they're very, very serious about meeting their budget obligations and their timeframe obligations. So just off the start. Water Resource Manager report, it is in writing. I'll try to keep it short. There is an item here right after on the grants regarding drinking water system infrastructure reliance and sustainability program grant application. I'm going to leave that at the end. Bianca's going to report on that since she helped write that application. So she'll report that on the end. So I'll turn it over to Bianca right at the end. Under the grants, we did get, I just saw from April, we got a little bit of money, not very much, about $11,000 from DWR. Things have slowed down at DWR. I don't know if that has to do with their other budget issues or whatever, but we've got a lot of money in for review. We're at about $1.8 million that we're waiting on right now. Most of that's under the implementation grant. The other part of it is part of closing out Proposition 1 and Prop 68 grant money, including the retention money, which there should be no issues with. It's clearly just closing the project and them issuing checks for our withholding the retention money that they held. And they've accepted our final report, so it's just a matter of processing there. We do have an urban community drought relief program grant for $3.345 million. We are in the final stages of executing that agreement. That'll supplement our shallow well mitigation program. Specifically, one of the areas might be for consolidation of shallow wells into adjacent water systems where it makes sense, but there's some grant money available. We're in the final stages of, like I said, finalizing that agreement. Carol's working on that. Some people from our office are working on it, and April's working on that. As part of the update on consultants' work, including the environmental right-of-way and design, there's a written report on what's been accomplished. We always include next steps, what our goals are, next steps for each one of the consultants that's in it in writing. You can review that. If you have any questions, let us know. So that takes us through the consultants that are working on the projects. Another item we have, Water Resource Management Report, is a shallow well mitigation program. We reported on that both on the PAC comments on the report form and on the summary sheet, so I won't cover it. There's nothing there. GSP 5-year update and this year's annual report. I'll just report that Carol received it and passed it on. We did receive, obviously late. This isn't real timely for us, in fact, because we're in the process of trying to pull together our annual report, and we are well into the 5-year update to the GSP. We did receive a guidance document from DWR for all submittal documents, which includes the 5-year update and the annual report. We are still in the process of evaluating what is being suggested by DWR on the guidance document for submittal of these documents. Initial look is that they're trying to streamline, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but trying to reduce the volume of material they are getting on their submittals. And I believe it's because they get backed up so badly with everybody submitting things on their deadlines that it's hard for them to get through it. So it looks like an attempt to streamline the work that we do and just focus on things that it may have changed from the previous submittal rather than a complete new document each time we do an annual report or each time we do a 5-year plan update. So we'll see. We will get our review of that guidance document together with the staff and then review that with DWR staff to make sure we're on the same page. And we'll report back to the board what the impacts of that are and how we will address that going forward with things that we need to produce, including the 5-year update to GSP and the annual report. Under the miscellaneous items, this is really Gene's area, and Gene's not on, didn't need to be on. I'll just give a couple of items. One is on the Rose Valley project, we expect to start drilling on the second well in early 2024. Gene is working on that. For the LA DWP emergency releases for flows, we're up to a total of about 12,500 acre feet at multiple locations off of the aqueduct. We're not seeing, as I mentioned before, we're not seeing really any basin impacts on monitoring wells. We will come back with a report towards the end of this year. Once we collect all the data, we'll come back with a report showing you what we did, what we do have on our monitoring wells, what information we have, and sort of an evaluation of whatever data we have. Since September 28th through October, there have been no releases, no reported releases going on. And so I think that's the Water Resource Manager's written report. I'll double back now. And Bianca, if you would like to please report on the application just submitted for federal funding to the pipeline project.
Yes. Yes, I'd like to report that staff has submitted an application for a federal grant from the Environmental Protection Agency as part of the Drinking Water System Infrastructure Resilience and Sustainability Program for additional funding for planning the imported water project. The requested funding amount is for $2.79 million, and we are requesting that for planning tasks not funded by DWR Sigma IP grant. The application was submitted on the due date, which was this past Monday, November 6th. The EPA will provide notice of award in spring of 2024. If there's any questions, I'm open to that as well. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, I just add that as Bianca mentioned, this is a federal grant request. As you would expect, we are created. The Groundwater Authority, we are created under state guidelines. So, getting state grants to support their own regulatory requirements, we've been fairly successful. We understand that this is an EPA grant request. This is federal. We understand it's going to be competitive. We put together a good application. We'll see what we get. But just as a heads up, this is different than the other grants we've applied for so far through the Groundwater Authority, as they were state, and now this is a federal, and it is competitive. So as Bianca mentioned, we'd be happy to answer any questions about her report or the Water Resource Manager report.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Bianca. Any questions from the board? And Steve, just to be clear, so that the federal grant, that money would be, or it could be used for the current work that we're doing through Provost and Pritchard and on that project. Is that correct?
Correct. It's for pipeline, yes. Pipeline work.
Very good. Well, all right. Seeing no further comments from the board, any public comment from the floor? Dave, go ahead.
Steve, quick question for clarification. With the newly received guidance from DWR, do you have an updated timeline that you might be bringing the first documents of the 5-year GSP update to the PAC?
I got to unmute. Sorry, David. I'm talking and anyway, I'm unmuted. No, we did provide a schedule. I think Heather went through a pretty detailed schedule before. The first documents or some initial chapters of the GSP are due right at the first of the year, January. We haven't changed any of that. It's a good question. When we come back with an understanding with DWR of what those guidance documents tell us to do, we will update that because, frankly, what we see is streamlining some of the upfront, general information documents, like basin settings, some of those things, may not need to be done as part of a GSP update. Prior to this guidance document, our understanding from DWR was the entire GSP is being updated. In other words, we take the GSP that was submitted and approved by DWR, we take it section by section and we update it. In addition to that, we address all of their recommended corrective actions as part of that update. That was the plan. So if there's a way that we can cut the workload back and still meet their guidelines, we will certainly look at that. But we'll update that, David, as soon as we know from DWR how these guidelines will affect our final product.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, any other public comment from the floor? Any public comment on the phones? Okay, seeing none. Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you, Bianca, and thank you, Jeff. We will now move on to item number 15, the General Manager's Report, and this will be with Carol.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First item is our financial report, and I believe you received those just a little later than the packet, but hopefully you have them there in front of you. So you have your financials through the end of October. And again, just a little late getting these out because our meeting came up so early in November. So I think the only thing that I would point out to you in the financials is the fact that, we're working very hard to spend money under our grant because we have such a tight deadline to get that $7.6 million spent. And our contractors have been working very, very hard to get the work done. And unfortunately, we're only able to invoice DWR quarterly, and there's a pretty good lag in DWR reviewing those invoices and submitting our reimbursements. So we're seeing a bit of a deficit just because we're probably close to $2 million behind, maybe $1 million and 1.7 million behind in DWR reimbursements at this point. And again, because we have to invoice quarterly, not all of that has actually been invoiced to them yet. But just to let you know, that's why there appears to be a deficit here. Next item is the communication and engagement plan update. And wanted to show you the electronic news blast that's in draft form right now. Sent it out to staff for comments, so this isn't the final. And I don't know if you're able to see it on the screen there. Oh, there it is. So basically, it's just something that the staff can send out either following board meetings or whenever we have some significant news items just to distribute. It's intended to be just very short news blurbs, a few paragraphs on significant items, maybe that resulted from board actions. For example, this one includes the funding path that you selected to seek federal funding for the water project, also on the completion of the preliminary design report and on the consolidation grant that we received. So we just have little short news items, and this is intended to be sent out electronically to our distribution list, and there'll be links built in to where people can click on them and access additional information that's available through our website. So once I get the thumbs up from staff, I'll be sending this out first for all of you to review, and then assuming we get the green light, we'll be sending this out to the community and doing it on a regular basis as the news items occur, or after each board meeting, depending on how much content we have to fill it up. And then also to let you know on the C&E plan update, we do have a consultant, staff person actually, with our GS who's working on our website update. He is hoping to have something working to look at in December, if not December, January. So we're excited about the facelift to our website as well. And then the last item is the monthly report from Capital Corps, and it's a pretty short report in the packet. And I'm not sure, we've already talked about the work through the year and the work plan for next year. So Michael, was there anything to add at this point, or are we good?
Nothing to add, available for questions.
Very good. So that will be my report, Mr. Chairman, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Carol. We'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments. Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the public. Any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, any public comment on the phones? None. All right, well, thank you, Carol, and thank you, Michael. And with that, item number 16, day of the next meeting is December 13th, 2023. And this, oh, we're going to backtrack. We do have a caller, late caller. So, okay, caller, go ahead. It's always the second time caller, go ahead.
I just have a question. This is Renee Westolusk on the COSO geothermal item listed on the month-to-date review expenditures. The royalty fund, the COSO geothermal royalty fund, are we not getting any funding this year for that?
So I'll go ahead and take that real quick, Mr. Chairman. So none of the projects that GA submitted for this year's funding were approved. I think we're still trying to work out the previous year's funding to get that into the right hands. Does that answer your question, Renee?
Yeah. Now, how does this affect for 2024? Are we dependent on what happens in Washington, D.C. in order to get funding if any of our projects are awarded?
I don't believe that affects any of the COSO projects. That's a separate funding line item.
That's separate funding, so we're not affected by not having an NDAA passed and all that.
No, especially for that previous year funding that we're just trying to push in the direction of the GA so that they can take care of the contract now.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Okay, any other public comment from the phones? Okay, seeing none. With that, the date of the next meeting is December 13th, 2023, and this meeting is adjourned.